Cantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Digital Empires, The Global Battle to Regulate Technology by Bradford. Narrated by Nancy Peterson. Introduction. When the Internet became widely commercialized in the 1990s, it arrived with the promise of freedom. Freedom for individuals to access information, exercise their voices, engage in debates, and shape societies. Early Internet pioneers saw online platforms as the guardians and amplifiers of those freedoms, enhancing democracy by providing an inclusive platform for promoting diverse voices around the world. Today, this techno-optimist promise of an enhanced human experience has, at least in part, been realized. The Internet has indeed democratized access to content and vastly expanded individuals' ability to receive, create, and disseminate all kinds of data, fundamentally transforming human beings' relationship with both information and with each other. This enhanced access to information and conversations has redefined the very fabric of human experience and undoubtedly generated immeasurable benefits for individuals and societies. And as the Internet evolves in the years ahead, it will almost certainly continue to deliver significant new benefits in ways individuals and societies cannot yet even imagine. Alongside these many benefits, however, the Internet has also altered societies and individual lives to their detriment. While the Internet has cultivated human connections and civic engagement, it has also been a channel for exposing vast segments of society to different forms of harmful content. Internet sites often serve as platforms for disinformation, bullying, hatred, and repulsive content, undermining the safety and dignity of individuals while dividing societies and destabilizing democracies. Algorithms designed to tailor online content to each user's preferences have fueled polarization and fragmentation, cultivating more extremist ideas and further eroding societal cohesion. Instead of only increasing freedom, enhancing democracy, and nurturing an egalitarian and inclusive communitarian culture, the Internet has also been used repeatedly to diminish these values, creating an ecosystem in which surveillance capitalism can thrive and societal divides deepen. Mitigating the individual and societal harms that arise from the Internet is just one piece of the broader governance challenge facing regulators of today's digital economy. Digital transformation has ushered in an exceedingly concentrated economy, where a few powerful companies control vast economic wealth and political power, restricting competition and widening the gap between winners and losers in the digital economy. The 5 largest tech companies, Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft, collectively recorded over $1 trillion in revenue in 2020, while earning an income of $197 billion and having a market capitalization of $7.5 trillion by the end of 2020. In 2021, the combined market capitalization of Apple, Alphabet, Meta, and Amazon exceeded the value of the over 2,000 companies listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange. Apple and Meta together were worth more than the 100 companies with the highest market cap listed on the London Stock Exchange, and Amazon alone eclipsed the entire German DAX index, which represents around 80% of the market cap of companies publicly listed in Germany. No doubt these tech companies would not have grown this big without developing products and services that consumers around the world value. But the law has also been on their side. For example, weak antitrust enforcement has amplified these companies' growth, allowing them to amass even more power through a staggering number of acquisitions. Over the past 3 decades, Amazon, Apple, Google, Meta, and Microsoft combined have acquired 770 startups. According to Apple's CEO Tim Cook, Apple alone has acquired approximately 1 company every 3 to 4 weeks for the past 6 years. Looking at this recent history, the power of these companies seems to only be growing stronger and more concentrated as the industry matures, with few obvious limits to how that power is deployed. There are several reasons to be concerned about this concentration of economic, political, and cultural power in a few large tech companies. First, this handful of companies controls a large proportion of the sector's wealth, allowing them to buy any competitor that threatens their market power. Second, their economic power buys them political influence that can be deployed to lobby for favorable regulation to further entrench that power. Third, these same companies increasingly control public discourse by moderating content on platforms where societal conversations, including political speech, take place. This allows them to exercise power over online infrastructures for democracy and public discourse. Fourth, these companies control much of the personal data that every user generates on a daily basis, which they have every incentive to extract for economic gain. These stores of data vest them with power over individual users. The cumulative effect of these different dimensions of power is to make these companies central to modern economic, political, and social life. The power vested in these companies is so vast that it increasingly competes with the power exercised by nation-states, a phenomenon that has raised significant concerns among governments around the world. Because of this accumulation of power, decisions by tech companies on how to wield their influence are becoming more consequential and controversial, opening up important questions about how societies and individual lives are being shaped by this multifaceted power. For example, when tech companies moderate content on their platforms, they face significant challenges in seeking to curtail harmful speech without suppressing free speech. To be sure, these companies err constantly in their efforts to achieve this balance, both in failing to restrict harmful speech in some cases and in censoring speech that has public value in others. Despite their efforts to take down detrimental content, major platforms, such as Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, overflow with content that is hateful, dangerous, and often illegal. Perhaps most disturbingly, the platforms still host terrorist propaganda and abhorrent violence all too frequently. For example, in 2019, a perpetrator who carried out a hate-motivated massacre of 50 people in a mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand, live-streamed his killings on Facebook. This tragedy received a large number of views on Facebook and various other online platforms, where the footage was replayed while the companies struggled to take down the various copies of the video appearing online. On the other hand, there are numerous examples where platforms' content removal efforts have been overzealous. In 2011, YouTube removed a video of a 13-year-old boy killed in the war in Syria in accordance with its policy prohibiting display of dead bodies. The image of the boy's dead body was shocking, but the image was meant to shock. The video was posted to awaken the international community to the horrors of the unfolding war, with the hope of galvanizing a global condemnation of the repressive Syrian regime. But as these examples reveal, drawing lines between permissible and impermissible speech in ways that are socially acceptable is exceedingly difficult. Yet, despite the delicate nature of content moderation, many government regulators have largely abdicated these types of decisions to the platforms themselves. In addition to the flawed outcomes from content moderation, the methods used in content moderation can be disconcerting as well. For example, alongside their reliance on algorithms, all platforms use human moderators that deploy so-called community guidelines to decide what content stays up and what is removed. But as revealed by the German newspaper Süddeutsche Zeitung in a 2018 story, there is a massive human toll borne by these moderators who work on the front lines, cleaning the internet. In return for meager pay and few employment protections, content moderators are exposed to a constant stream of graphic violence and cruelty. The story reported that a single Facebook moderator in Germany, for instance, was expected to handle 1,300 reports a day. A 2014 article published in Wired documented the work of Facebook's content moderators in the Philippines, who cleaned the platform of illegal content while being paid $1 to $4 per hour for their work. These moderators are exposed hour after hour to the worst possible content posted to these internet platforms. One Google moderator estimated having to filter through 15,000 images a day, including images of child pornography, beheadings, and animal abuse. In 2020, Meta settled a lawsuit brought by over 10,000 of its content moderators, agreeing to pay $52 million in mental health compensation. Content moderators pay an enormous psychological price in helping to keep their platforms safer and more civil for users around the world. But their plight also lays bare the distance between the highly compensated and powerful tech executives in Silicon Valley and the behind-the-scenes labor employed to scour the internet for harmful content. This human toll further calls into question the early techno-optimist vision of the internet as an emancipatory force that would inevitably dismantle existing institutions of power and lead to a more humane and fair world. Another reason to be concerned about the concentration of power among a few tech companies relates to their collection of user data as part of their business model, and the impact of that data collection on user privacy. This surveillance capitalism describes how tech companies extract vast data on their users' private lives and commercialize that information through targeted advertising, which threatens those people's rights to privacy and individual self-determination. At worst, users' personal data can be harnessed to serve not only commercial, but also political goals. The Cambridge Analytica scandal, where a British political consulting firm acquired Facebook users' private data and used it in political campaigns, illustrates this problem in no uncertain terms. In this case, Internet users' private data was deployed with the goal of influencing the election in favor of President Trump. This or any similar attempt to manipulate voters compromises individuals' decisional privacy and undermines their trust in democracy. Internet users are not only vulnerable to surveillance by private tech companies, but also to digital surveillance by governments who rely on tech companies and their digital tools to further their national security or law enforcement objectives. The Chinese government's surveillance of its citizens, including its deployment of facial recognition technology, is particularly far-reaching. Hundreds of millions of surveillance cameras are already installed across China, where the government can now match the video footage to personal data collected elsewhere, identifying individuals in real time, and potentially predicting or even preventing political resistance before it even happens. The government has rolled out AI-driven surveillance programs such as Sharp Eyes, the goal of which is to create an omnipresent, fully integrated, always working and fully controllable nationwide surveillance system built and supported by Chinese tech companies. Yet it is not only authoritarian governments that deploy the Internet as a tool for surveillance. Democratic governments, including the United States, also conduct extensive surveillance operations, as former U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, contractor Edward Snowden revealed as part of the unprecedented leak of sensitive U.S. intelligence data in 2013. Those Snowden revelations exposed how the NSA had engaged in a mass surveillance of individuals by harvesting data available through Facebook. Without proper oversight, it is both tempting and feasible for any government to utilize the surveillance capabilities of tech companies to advance their political goals or national security objectives, even when that surveillance undermines individuals' civil liberties. Many of these concerns are now amplified with the rapid advances in artificial intelligence, AI. The innovations in so-called generative AI technologies in particular have the potential to revolutionize the way we work and interact with information and each other. At best, generative AI will allow humans to reach new frontiers of knowledge and productivity, leading to unprecedented levels of economic growth and societal progress. At the same time, the pace of AI development is unsettling technologists, citizens, and regulators alike. AI is already used to power both private and government surveillance, and to manipulate human behavior. But those activities can now reach new heights with larger training datasets and more sophisticated AI tools. A growing fear is that these technologies will give powerful tools for bad actors to exploit and defraud people, or commit other illegal acts. They might also soon be used by anyone to unleash waves of disinformation. Even ardent techno-enthusiasts are now issuing dire warnings on how unregulated AI can lead to these and many other uncontrollable harms, posing severe threats to individuals and societies. The direst predictions presage the AI's ability to obliterate labor markets and make humans obsolete, or, under the most hyperbolic scenario, even destroy humanity. As people have become increasingly aware of the risks and potentially harmful effects associated with the use of these digital tools, and with tech companies' vast economic power and social impact, it is not surprising that calls for greater regulation of these companies are growing. Recently, several governments have begun to respond to these popular demands by asserting their regulatory powers, leading prominent news outlets to proclaim how a global tipping point for the reining in tech has arrived, and to describe how big tech braces for a wave of regulation. For the past decade, the European Union has been leading this fight, frequently leveraging its antitrust laws, data protection laws, and other regulatory instruments to reclaim control over the industry. But the EU is no longer the lone crusader in taking on the leading tech giants. The Chinese government has initiated an unprecedented crackdown on its tech sector in the name of advancing common prosperity, and in order to ensure that tech giants do not overpower the Chinese state. The tide may finally be turning even in the U.S., where Congress is reassessing the need to rewrite U.S. antitrust laws, enact a federal privacy law, or revisit the Communications Decency Act of 1996, which shields Internet platforms from liability for the content they host. However, even if the problems associated with the tech industry have led to a broadening consensus that the digital economy needs to be regulated, there is no consensus among governments on what that regulation should look like. Digital empires. 3 competing regulatory models. Today, there are 3 dominant digital powers: the U.S., China, and the EU, who can metaphorically be thought of as digital empires. These modern empires of the Internet era are the leading technology, economic, and regulatory powers, each with the ambition and capability to shape the global digital order toward their interests and values. They have each developed a distinct governance model for their domestic digital economies, consistent with their different ideological commitments. Not unlike the empires of the past, they have further exported their domestic models in an effort to expand their respective spheres of influence, thus pulling other countries into the orbits of the American, Chinese, or European digital empires. The digital empires find their closest analog not in the former territorial empires, but in various informal empires of the 20th century that projected economic, military, and cultural power across their borders, creating power asymmetries that vested them with influence over foreign societies. Today's digital empires are primarily exporting their tech companies, technologies, and rules governing those technologies, thus shaping countries and individuals that fall under their influence toward the norms and values they espouse. Each digital empire holds a different vision for the digital economy, which is reflected in the regulatory models they have adopted at home and promoted abroad. These three leading regulatory models could be thought of as representing three varieties of digital capitalism, drawing on different theories about the relationship between markets, the state, and individual and collective rights. As described throughout this book, the U.S. has pioneered a largely market-driven model, China a state-driven model, and the EU a rights-driven model. Each of these regulatory models involves societal choices that rest on diverging economic theories, political ideologies, and cultural identities. In deciding how to regulate the digital economy, governments in the three jurisdictions have all had to balance their support of technological innovation with the implications those technologies have for civil liberties, the distribution of wealth, international trade, social stability, and national security, among other key policy concerns. This balancing effort has led to some similarities, but also notable differences across the leading regulatory models. As each model is associated with contested policy choices that subject them to criticism, each for different reasons, there is no global consensus on which of the three dominant regulatory models best serves the goal of building a vibrant and resilient digital economy and society. The U.S. has traditionally followed a market-driven regulatory model, which has provided the foundation for the global digital economy as it exists today. The American regulatory approach centers on protecting free speech, the free Internet, and incentives to innovate. It is characterized by its discernible techno-optimism and relentless pursuit of innovation. The U.S. government has historically viewed the Internet as a source of economic prosperity and political freedom, and consequently as a tool for societal transformation and progress. The American market-driven model exhibits uncompromising faith in markets and embraces a limited role for the government. According to this techno-libertarian view, government intervention not only compromises the efficient operation of markets, it also undermines individual liberty. Thus, while the U.S.'s commitment to innovation and growth provides the economic rationale against government intervention, its commitment to individual liberty and freedom is often invoked as a political reason to limit the government's role. Minimizing government interference is seen as essential to producing a vibrant democratic society characterized by free speech and the engagement of diverse voices in civic life. From this perspective, the government is only expected to step in to protect national security. On cybersecurity issues, for example, the U.S. government has a role to play alongside tech companies. Few would dispute that many of the prized innovations that shape our everyday lives today can be traced to Silicon Valley. innovations that the American market-driven model has directly facilitated. At the same time, privacy advocates and other critics argue that this zealous pursuit of innovation has come at the expense of protecting individual Internet users' rights. The EU has joined these advocates in arguing that, absent regulatory safeguards, public and private surveillance thrive under the U.S. model and severely compromise individuals' right to privacy and political autonomy. Seen from this vantage point, a world governed by tech companies' business models subjects Internet users to behavioral advertising and manipulation that subvert individual choice, liberty, and self-governance. By allowing for this, the U.S. model thus compromises individuals' abilities to exercise their agency and to participate in democracy. Several recent high-profile scandals illustrate the problem, including the Snowden revelations and the Cambridge Analytica scandal mentioned previously. The EU and other critics of the market-driven regulatory model can also point out how Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other platforms have repeatedly failed to remove dangerous disinformation on topics ranging from the COVID-19 pandemic to democratic elections. And they can replay the images of the January 6, 2021 insurrection at the U.S. Capitol, which originated in a rampant social media-fueled disinformation campaign about a stolen election. Consequently, when looking strictly at innovation and economic growth, the American market-driven model can be praised for its ability to nurture tech companies. But that economic benefit comes at the expense of risking fundamental rights, human dignity, political autonomy, and democracy. In contrast to the American market-driven regulatory model, the Chinese regulatory model rests on a state-driven vision for the digital economy. The Chinese government seeks to maximize the country's technological dominance while maintaining social harmony and control over its citizens' communications. China is determined to leverage technology to fuel its economic growth and development. It is currently engaged in an unprecedented state-led effort geared toward becoming the world's leading technology superpower. In addition to pursuing this economic goal, the government is focused on tightening the political grip of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP, by deploying the Internet as a tool for control, surveillance, and propaganda. To achieve these goals, the CCP has harnessed the power of its private tech companies. In return for the initially lax regulatory approach that helped them grow and flourish, Chinese tech companies have acted as the CCP's surrogates, performing the surveillance and control functions of the state over their users. However, the Chinese government is increasingly adopting the view that the largest tech companies have grown too powerful. It has recently leveraged its antitrust laws to rein in domestic giants such as Alibaba and Tencent, the opening salvo of an unprecedented assault on its domestic tech industry. Yet even this newest turn in digital regulation serves the fundamental goal of the Chinese government, cementing the state's control of the digital economy as a defining feature of China's regulatory model. Like the U.S., China has been tremendously successful in fostering technological innovations, allowing leading tech companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, and Huawei to emerge. At the same time, the Chinese state-driven regulatory model has also come under increasing criticism in democratic countries, as the Chinese government systematically harnesses the Internet as a tool for censorship and political control. Many foreign governments, including the U.S. and the EU, condemn the Chinese government's policy of banning and filtering online content on a large scale, a policy colloquially known as the Great Firewall. Many foreign companies have become a direct casualty of this policy, including Google, Meta, and Twitter. which have largely abandoned the Chinese market due to the government's extensive censorship policies. China's large-scale deployment of facial recognition techniques for law enforcement purposes.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?